Hello, everyone. My name is Clara, and I am a development officer at the Journal of Young Investigators, which is the world's largest undergraduate only journal. Today, we have our wonderful guest with us today, Dr. Penitan. Do you want to introduce yourself and kind of describe what you do?
Sure. So my name is Alexander Patanen, and I received my bachelor's degree at UCLA, and also my master's and PhD at UCLA in biochemistry and molecular biology. I'm currently a medical communications manager at AMGEN, a biotech company located in Thousand Oaks.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us today, Doctor. So just first things first, what kind of drew you toward your profession?
So that's a very good question. It was kind of a long, windy road. Um, Again, I got my master's and PhD at UCLA in biochemistry and molecular biology, and I loved the fact that you could discover something new every single time you went to the lab. So that drew me into the research aspect, and I also love teaching. Whenever we had an undergrad or a high school student or another graduate student, always enjoyed teaching them the fundamentals of research and discovering along with them various scientific facts. And so when I graduated with my PhD at UCLA, I wanted to become a professor. And I became a postdoc, again, also at UCLA. Really enjoyed my postdoctoral scholar at UCLA doing mitochondrial biology. Um, and, it was a fruitful stock and a little bit of undergrad. I had a lot of publications, I think a total of around 20 publications. A lot of them came in my time and really was geared up to being a professor. But things changed, unfortunately, and we can talk about that in a follow-up question. But um, I eventually got drawn into industry because it resembled a lot of things that I wanted to do in life. Again, that was the research, understanding science, and also teaching. And so I became a medical communications manager at AMGEN because it had a lot of parallels to becoming a professor in academia.
Okay, that's great to hear. I know that a lot of, the undergraduates who may be listening, may have an interest in industry versus academia, and you briefly touched on this, but could you kind of go a little bit more into why you chose industry over academia, even though you had, been in academia and had been really ready and prepared for that for such a while?
Yes, so that's a good question. And I was very fortunate when I was a graduate student, and that's something very important for all of you undergrads to um, to realize is that you need really good mentors in life. And when I was a graduate student, I had a great mentor, had a real passion for the sciences and being a professor and teaching and learning and discovering. And I really wanted to be just like him. And that drew me into the professor field or professor direction. And it was, a fun journey and also a journey full of life lessons. So I mentioned I like teaching. I like teaching to a wide variety of audiences, and I got involved with a lot of programs at UCLA where we helped minority or disadvantaged students get involved in research. Because I think science is not limited to one certain group of people. It's a very diverse and inclusive field, and I myself come from a multiracial background. Both of my parents were, immigrants to the United States. I'm the first real student, real person to go to college. First one to get obviously a master's or a PhD in my whole family. And so, I'm all for inclusion and diversity in the science. So I spent a lot of time promoting that. And it was kind of disappointing when I was going to apply to become a professor, that I actually had um, some people at universities tell me that they couldn't hire me because of my particular skin color. They said, you sound like a certain type of person, and we can't hire you. And it was very sad because a lot of I really like teaching, and I always envision myself as a professor, but to be sort of you know, discriminated based on my own skin color, even though I myself come from a minority background, was very disappointing. And so I looked elsewhere, and in industry, they had a big push for diversity and inclusion, and helping people not only deliver drugs so that people can have better lives, but also making sure that the staff were representative. So looked into industry and was happy that AMGEN, which isn't too far down the road, was doing work that I also was interested in.
Mhm. That's great to hear. I mean, Amgen's, an amazing company and you seem to really enjoy it. Do you, just on an everyday basis, what skills did you utilize in your undergraduate and graduate career that you now really use today, as you're working at Amgen?
Good question. So I should preface that when I was thinking about moving into industry, I knew a lot of people who would tell me, why would you go to industry? It's sort of like you're giving up science. You're giving up being a scientist to go to that other side. Sort of like Star Wars, right? You're going to the dark side. And I would say that's very far from the truth. So as an undergrad, as a master's and PhD student, we learn how to interpret data. We learn how to critically analyze data and determine rational next steps. Um, and that's really important, not just in the sciences or in the lab at a research bench, but it's also important elsewhere in life. And so in my current job, I do a lot of critical analysis of data, interpreting what the data means, and also how to convey that data to other people. So as a PhD student, for example, postdoc, I would often take my data and interpret it and convey it to other scientists. And at Amgen, as a medical communications manager, I do the same thing. I take data, I interpret it, but I convey it not to other scientists alone, although we do convey information to other scientists, but I also convey that information to a physician or a patient. And each one of those people require the information to be distilled in a different manner, because what's common sense to a physician may be super complicated to a patient. And being able to not only critically analyze the data, but also convert between how I say the data between different people. I mean, basically a skill that we all learn as we move through our undergrad and through graduate school. These critical analysis skill.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, critical analysis skills and then also, being able to communicate that information is so important within science and the scientific community. Do you find that you have trouble, or did you, when you were first starting out and maybe not working with as many scientists, but maybe some physicians or um, people who are outside of your field, did you have trouble communicating with them some of the science that you were working on? And what were some techniques and things that you did to overcome those potential miscommunications or issues among them?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Work now, there's a lot of focus, for example, because pharmacists know a lot about how drugs work and how to dose patients and all the nitty gritties of how to treat people. And coming from a scientist background, we know mechanisms. We know how a drug biochemically will work, But if you ask me how to, dose a patient for this particular drug, I'm obviously less of an expert. Into Amgen, it actually was very refreshing in some regards because, as a graduate student or as a postdoc, you're used to talking to the same class of people, scientists, and we all kind of talk in jargon and scientific terms. And now, pharmacists, they have their own sort of jargon, and understanding that jargon is a challenge, obviously, but it's also quite um, exciting challenge because that's a really important world to know. We all will have some sort of disease, one or another, whether it's just a very minor thing like an allergy or something else. And we'll be prescribed something, and understanding the language behind how drugs are prescribed, even the language behind those YouTube commercials you see where a drug is being advertised, understanding how those videos are made and how there's always a purpose for something in those videos was actually very enlightening. Obviously, it wasn't an overnight thing. It was a lot of questions to my colleagues who are pharmacists about what does this mean. That's an important skill you develop um, as a grad student in particular, right? Graduate school takes a long time, and you got to be patient, and you have to learn how to interact with different people of different skill sets. And that helped prepare me for when I moved into industry because I definitely needed to learn from my colleagues. And you know, I don't know everything in the world, and gaining that knowledge from other people, it was super important. And it's a great motivation to go to work the next day because you're learning something new every single day.
Mhm. I think that's a really amazing take on that. And thank you for your insight when working with, others in the field. Um, so I guess for the undergraduates or even maybe potential graduate or high school students who are listening, um, how did you kind of gain experiences in industry or decide that I mean, we went over, why you kind of picked industry over academia, but were there certain experiences or things that you did that either helped you get that position in industry or also solidify your decision to really pursue industry as a career?
But that's an impact question there. There's actually many questions all all in one, right? So I'll try and answer the best I can.
Mhm.
So the way I saw it was, um, you know, I went to graduate school, wanted to be that professor, um, learned that academia wasn't necessarily all that I thought it was to be. It wasn't all sunshine and roses, as they say. And I obviously applied to a variety of different places too, in between, finding my ultimate job. I even applied to be a NASA astronaut, and obviously, I'm not an astronaut at this moment. Um, but when I looked at all my different options, really industry stuck out to me because it was a way that you could impact people
Mhm.
um, in a decent amount of time.
Okay.
Postdoc, I was doing this really exciting research, but at the same time, I knew that these results that I were finding, uh, they were really exciting to me, might not impact people. And for example, as a postdoc, was working on tools to transfer mitochondria to cells using really cool bioengineering approaches, actually. And we would have a sick cell that had pretty bad mitochondria, and we would put in healthy mitochondria into those cells, and magically the cell will be happy. And I thought that was the latest and greatest to me. However, translating that over to treating a patient with a metabolic or mitochondrial disorder, that's going to take a really long time. And that's one thing that was a little bit discouraging in some sense to me because, I wanted to make an impact. And so I looked at my different options, and industry was one of those paths that you could impact people, because no matter your role in industry, you're all moving towards the same thing, helping patients live a better life, hopefully, um, and excited about this role. You said how, there was another part of your question there about how did I prepare myself?
Yeah.
Could you rephrase
Um,
that?
if you, I guess, were there certain things that you did in preparation for, um, applying for your industry job, certain resources that you used, etc.?
Yeah, okay, so that's a very important question, because everything you do, no matter how mundane you think it is, will have some implication on a career path. And so, for example, I was a graduate student and things.
Mhm.
And then I applied to industry, and uh, very specific duties that it said you'd have to be in charge of. And initially, I was very frustrated because I looked at it and I said, I must have a budget. And I thought to myself, well, I've never really done that too. As a postdoc, I sort of managed the budget. I had a research project, reagents, certain cell lines. I knew the lab doesn't have infinite amount of money, and I needed to prioritize. What do I buy first? When do I need to buy it?
Mhm.
And I would have graduate students and undergraduates that worked with me, even a high school student, and I would have to prioritize. Okay, could they do this experiment because we may not have money for that? So I need to prioritize this experiment over that. And so ultimately, I did have experience with a budget. Um, Other parts of the industry job application include, managing people. You may not think about it, but when you mentor someone, that's managing somebody. And whether it was a high school student, undergrad, grad student, we were all working together for a common purpose. How was, you have, catastrophe in a lab. And so that's managing people, no matter how small it is. Even you, for example, working at JYI, you're managing people also. You're managing, if you have staff underneath you, you're prioritizing what projects they work on, how they work on it, when they work on it. And these are not just JYI skills or, grad student skills. These are life skills that will translate over to really any career you go down. And when I was applying to my industry job, advice I got along the way, because we're just one people, individuals, but to really understand bigger picture things, you need to talk with your friends or your future. And I got a lot of perspectives on convert my academic perspectives, academic resume into an industry resume, and translating over all those skills. And the more I did, the more I realized, hey, I do have a lot of real world experiences. We all do. We just have to think about them in a different frame of light. So
That's
hope
really great. Um, to hear, maybe some students who are in academia right now and are thinking of switching to industry, being able to think about the experiences they have currently and then being able to talk about them and apply them to, an industry job, or maybe undergraduates who are interning in industry either this summer or next summer. Um,
and it doesn't just apply to an industry job. If you want to work in government, let's say you want to be, you would translate over your skills for the most part. Besides, for example, zero G, training. Um, budgets. We've all done that to certain degrees.
Mhm. Yep. Absolutely.
Job.
And then I think we just have a few more questions left. So, just quickly, are there any resources that you would like to talk about that would help students progress and improve themselves, maybe specific to your field? So, conferences, journals that you would always refer to, websites, programs.
So and say one thing is when you're an undergrad or graduate student, you know, interacting with people is super important. We sometimes think that if you're a scientist or an engineer, right, you just kind of do your own thing. You're just kind of like that, this that just like in the corner. Um, However, our job makes us interact with a whole bunch of people all the time, and those career workshops is important. Um, and making connections with people who go off into a wide array of fields is super important. We always hear about it's important to network, and we
Mm.
always think, yeah, it's important to network. Um, Networking the right way. Remember, as a grad student and postdoc, I would go to these like career development sessions, and people come give talks about careers, but I would never really, you know, discuss those careers to the extent that I wanted. A connection with those people enough so that they important as you progress from undergrad to the next stages is don't forget those friends that you make along the way, and keep an eye on them as they progress, because you may go down a field that they go down sometime, and you need to learn about their experience. There is a good resource. It's put out by I believe Science Careers, and the name is actually it's maybe we can add that somehow to this video at the bottom. But there's a survey that Science Careers puts out, or the AAAS, and it's a survey that asks you a whole bunch of questions, and then it gives you certain careers, your interests, and your career design skills.
Mhm.
Grad student, they give you this survey like every year, and as a postdoc, I think the same thing. And I remember I would put my answers in. you know you should become a professor, and I was like, that's right, I should become a professor. It gives you many different paths, and it ranks it based on like a percentage scale. And I would see the number 5 or 6 item on this results page saying professor, and I'd be like, yep, that survey proves my point. I want to be a professor, and this scientific test literally told me I should go down that path. However, I ignored the 4 or 5 other jobs that preceded the professor career path. And actually, the first one was scientific education to a non scientist, which is basically a medical communications manager. And so I completely ignored that, pushed it to the side, this test result, thinking that I knew, what I wanted to be, and I didn't really put any thought to my other options, which was a big mistake. I should have been more conscious about what other things could match my interests, could match my skills. And so that tool, which hopefully will link down below somehow in this video that's put out by AAAS, yeah, that was a very important tool thinking back now.
Mhm. That's great. We'll link that actually down below just for undergraduates who are interested. I know the AAAS has some really great resources for any undergraduates who are interested. So we'll definitely link that down below. And okay, I think those are all the questions that we have. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day to join us and provide this really useful information and advice for all of those who watch this.
Yeah, absolutely. It was my pleasure, and I hope whoever listens to this, best of luck as they proceed in their careers, and always keep your horizons wide open because you never know where it will lead you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
No problem.